Um, when you look down at your dog sleeping at your feet or like your cat purring on the windowsill, it is so easy to think that your relationship with them is completely isolated.
Oh, absolutely.
Just you, the animal, a whole lot of love, and maybe a bag of kibble. I mean, it feels incredibly simple, like a closed, private loop.
Right. It feels like a miniature ecosystem, one that exists completely apart from the chaos of the rest of the world. Just a quiet bond in your living room.
Yeah, exactly. But then you start looking at the actual data, the legal codes, the biology, and suddenly that closed loop just shatters.
It really does.
You realize that the animal sleeping on your rug is actually standing at the dead center of a massive, invisible, interconnected infrastructure. I mean, landlords, lawmakers, and even genetics, they all have a hand in dictating that animal's fate.
Yeah, the invisible strings are everywhere.
So today on the Deep Dive, we are uncovering the hidden systems that govern the lives of our pets. And to do this, we're diving into a really fascinating stack of sources.
We really have a wide range today.
We do. We have a massive housing study out of the University of Florida. We have the actual text of California's animal protection penal codes. And we've specialized veterinary manuals. So we are taking you on a journey from the absolute macro to the intense micro.
Yeah, so we are starting by zooming all the way out to systemic societal pressures, right? Like specifically looking at how modern housing policies dictate who even gets to keep a pet.
Right.
Then we'll narrow our focus to the state level, examining the legal safety nets, specifically California's penal codes, to see how society intervenes when things go terribly wrong.
And then the biology part.
Exactly. Finally, we are zooming all the way down to the cellular level, looking at the intense biological reality of purpose breeding, and we're using the Yorkshire Terrier as our primary case study for that.
Well, let's unpack the societal level first, because we have to ask what happens when our very human, very ancient desire to share our lives with an animal collides head-on with the modern reality of real estate.
It's a huge collision right now.
It is. So we're looking at this study out of University of Florida Health, and it was led by researcher Dr. Jennifer Applebaum. Her team analyzed just an enormous data set, 28,000 housing-related relinquishment records from 21 U.S. animal shelters.
Wow.
Yeah, and this spans from 2019 to 2023.
And that specific timeline provides a really crucial window into this issue. I mean, it captures the pre-pandemic era, the peak of the pandemic with all its eviction moratoriums and massive adoption booms, and, the post-pandemic reality we are navigating today.
Right, the whole roller coaster?
Exactly. And what Dr. Applebaum's team uncovered is staggering. Basically, housing issues now account for 14% of all animal shelter intakes.
14%, just purely because of housing logistics.
Yeah, 14%.
That is wild. And this data completely upends some of the biggest assumptions people make about renting with pets. Because, the conventional wisdom has always been, if you rent an apartment, get a small dog.
Right, that's what everyone says.
Yeah. A small dog flies under the radar. A small dog protects you from landlord restrictions. But the numbers here, they tell a totally different story.
They really do. The data set reveals a very different reality on the ground. Because when the researchers looked at the physical sizes of the dogs being given up strictly due to housing issues, the large dogs relinquished averaged 75 pounds.
Okay, which makes sense.
Right. But the small dogs being surrendered, they averaged just 12 pounds.
12 pounds. I mean, that is practically the size of a bag of sugar.
Literally tiny.
So why is a 12-pound dog ending up in a shelter if they aren't, violating standard weight limits?
Well, it shatters the idea of a quote-unquote safe pet size. A 12-pound animal is still getting surrendered because many of the overarching housing crises don't discriminate by size at all.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, like if a tenant faces a sudden eviction or if a corporate landlord buys a building and institutes a blanket no pet policy across the board, it just doesn't matter if the dog is a Great Dane or a Chihuahua. The systemic loss of housing affects them equally.
Wow. There is a fascinating nuance in the trends over time, though, because the data shows that the proportion of pit bull-type dogs surrendered due to housing actually declined during that 4-year study period.
Which is interesting, yeah.
Which feels like a silver lining, right?
Yeah.
It suggests that maybe the cultural push against breed-specific bans in rental agreements is actually working.
It does. That decline in pit bull surrenders does indicate that certain pet-inclusive housing advocacy is, making a dent. However, there is a much heavier context to consider here.
What's that?
While specific landlord conflicts regarding breed or weight restrictions declined, instances of animals entering shelters due to sheer catastrophic loss of housing like formal eviction or sudden homelessness rose significantly.
Oh, man. So the specific apartment policies might be getting slightly more pet-friendly,
Mhm.
but the broader foundation of housing security is just crumbling beneath the owners.
Exactly. It's the overall economic instability.
And looking at the outcomes for these animals in the study, it paints a really complex emotional picture. The study notes that 95% of these housing surrendered animals left the shelter alive, with 76% being adopted by new families.
Right. And a high live release rate is always the goal of a shelter, of course.
Yeah.
But we have to look at the human cost hidden inside that statistic.
Yeah, because the original owner is gone.
Exactly. The animals survived, but a family unit was still permanently broken apart. Furthermore, the data showed that for owners who were completely unhoused at the time of surrender, their pets had lower live outcome rates.
That is heartbreaking.
It really is. Additionally, euthanasia in these specific housing loss scenarios was statistically more common for dogs than for cats.
Wow. I really want to focus on something else Dr. Applebaum pointed out, though, regarding the everyday economics of renting with a pet.
Oh, the fees.
Yes. She highlights the arbitrary nature of pet fees. Because a landlord might charge a flat monthly pet rent to a tenant with a purely indoor cat, and that fee is essentially pooled to subsidize the apartment complex's outdoor dog park, or like a communal pet washing station.
Right, which the cat obviously isn't using.
Exactly. That is wild to me. That's like an apartment complex forcing you to pay an extra $50 a month for a luxury gym membership when you only ever use the reading room.
It is very similar to that. But Dr. Applebaum's research points out that for a pet owner, these fees are compulsory. With a gym, you can just opt out.
Sure.
In this housing structure, you are paying a mandatory premium just for the right of your animal to exist in that space, regardless of the resources they consume.
Which makes me really question the core motivation here. Like, are these policies, the weight limits, the exorbitant deposits, the monthly pet rent, are they actually about protecting the landlord's physical property from damage? Or are they just systemic barriers functioning as revenue generators?
That's the big question.
Because it feels like a very effective way to just extract more money from a captive demographic.
And Dr. Applebaum frames this as a deeply systemic issue. In her published research, she argues that the modern housing structure makes pet ownership an incredibly fragile privilege rather than a standard aspect of family life.
A fragile privilege. That's a powerful way to say it.
Yeah. Her paper suggests that the heartbreak happening at the shelter intake desk isn't just an isolated animal welfare issue. She views it as a profound social justice issue. Lower-income renters are frequently forced into a devastating choice: secure a roof over their family's head or surrender a beloved companion.
So her team's conclusion is that economics are essentially forcing families apart.
Yeah.
And, we aren't here to weigh in on housing politics or take sides on landlord regulations, but looking purely at the data she compiled, the correlation at the shelter desk is just undeniable.
It really is. It's a very heavy reality.
It is. But it also sets up a stark contrast for what we are looking at next because, well, you have families torn apart by systemic economic pressure situations where an owner desperately wants to keep their pet, but simply can't afford the roof over both their heads.
Right.
But there is a massive gulf between a forced economic surrender and someone actively maliciously harming an animal. And that is where we see the state step in.
Exactly. So we are turning to California's animal protection laws now, which provide some of the most comprehensive legal frameworks in the country.
Yeah, the legal safety net.
Right. And to understand how the state intervenes, we have to look at how the law fundamentally defines an animal. Under California Penal Code 599B, the law bluntly defines animal as every dumb creature.
Okay, stop right there. Because I read that Penal Code 599B, and I have to admit, I immediately recoiled.
I get that response a lot.
Like, dumb creature. How is that the official modern legal terminology for an animal we consider a beloved family member? It sounds so dismissive.
It does sound incredibly harsh to our modern ears. But in archaic legal terminology, dumb does not mean unintelligent. It means mute, unable to speak.
Oh, okay, that completely changes the context.
Yeah, it is the legal system's way of structurally acknowledging that the victim cannot testify for themselves, they cannot sit on a witness stand, they cannot point to their abuser, and they cannot advocate for their own safety.
Right.
Therefore, the burden falls entirely on the state to act as their voice.
And the state backs that up with some serious penalties.
Yeah.
Let's look at the mechanisms of general cruelty. In California, maliciously injuring or killing an animal is classified as a wobbler offense.
Yeah, and a wobbler is a specific legal mechanism that gives the prosecutor crucial flexibility. It means the crime can be charged as either a misdemeanor or a felony.
Based on what?
The prosecutor makes that determination based on the severity of the act and the defendant's criminal history. So if a case wobbles down to a misdemeanor, the penalty is up to a year in county jail and a $20,000 fine.
Okay, still a big fine.
Right. But if it wobbles up to a felony, the penalty increases to up to 3 years imprisonment, alongside that same $20,000 fine.
Wow.
This flexibility exists because animal cruelty can range from, say, a momentary tragic lapse of judgment resulting in neglect to calculated sadistic torture. The law needs room to distinguish between the two.
That makes sense. But the part of these legal documents that absolutely blew my mind was the cross-reporting mandates.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Because we always hear about mandated reporters for child abuse, right? Like teachers, pediatricians, social workers. But California has actively, structurally overlapped animal welfare agencies and human welfare agencies.
Yes, this represents one of the most vital evolutions in modern legal philosophy. California law dictates that animal control and humane officers must report any suspected or known child abuse they witness while performing their duties.
That is incredible.
And conversely, employees of child or adult protective services may report suspected animal abuse.
Okay, so it goes both ways.
Exactly. Furthermore, veterinarians are legally required to report suspected animal fighting or cruelty, and the state grants them complete immunity from civil liability for doing so.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning they cannot be sued for trying to save an animal's life by reporting the owner.
Wow. Why weave these entirely different agencies together, though? What is the functional mechanism that makes, like, a dog warden responsible for a child's safety?
Well, decades of sociological data have overwhelmingly proven that violence is intersectional. The psychological link between animal abuse and human abuse, particularly child abuse, elder abuse, and intimate partner violence, is profound.
Right, I've heard that before.
Yeah, people who abuse animals rarely stop with animals. Frequently, abusers will use a beloved family pet as leverage to terrorize and control their human victims.
That's terrifying.
It is. So, in those specific instances, the law recognizes that the animal is not merely a companion. A service dog is legally viewed as an extension of the person's autonomy, mobility, and physical capability.
Wow, that's profound.
So, to maliciously harm a guide dog is to actively disable the human being who relies on it.
You also find these fascinating historical holdovers in the code, like an absolute prohibition on bullfights anywhere in the state, unless they are entirely bloodless and held as part of a recognized religious celebration.
Right, there are definitely some older, highly specific laws still on the books.
And then there is the hot car law, Penal Code 597.7, which I love. California grants civil and criminal immunity to everyday citizens and first responders who break into a vehicle to remove an animal that is in immediate danger from heat, cold, or a lack of ventilation.
Yes, the hot car immunity.
You can literally shatter someone's car window if you have a good faith belief the animal is dying,
Okay.
and the owner cannot sue you for the property damage.
Now, the mechanism of that immunity does require you to follow specific steps. You can't just go smashing windows immediately.
Good point. What are the steps?
You have to check if the doors are unlocked first, obviously. Then you must contact law enforcement or 911 before breaking the glass, and you have to remain with the animal until authorities arrive.
Got it.
But fundamentally, it empowers the general public to act as an immediate physical extension of the law when seconds count and life is on the line.
The state clearly goes to great lengths to protect animals from external harm. But there is one legal area that bridges us into a totally different conversation, and that is breed-specific legislation, or BSL.
Yes. This is where it gets complicated.
Right, because California law dictates that cities and counties cannot regulate dogs specifically by breed. A local mayor cannot just decide to ban pit bulls or Rottweilers outright.
Correct. However, local governments are permitted to enact breed-specific laws regarding spaying and neutering.
Why the distinction?
Localities use those spay and neuter ordinances to manage shelter populations without crossing the line into blanket property bans. But this legal protection of breeds brings up a much more complicated tension. Well, the state prevents a city from banning a specific breed, but what happens when the harm isn't coming from a malicious owner or a hot car? What happens when the harm is written directly into their DNA by us?
Wow. That is the perfect question to bring us into our final segment. We have looked at the societal housing squeeze, and we have analyzed the legal shields.
Hmm.
Now, we are looking at the biological reality of the animals we have actively molded to our preferences.
Yes, exactly.
We are stepping out of the courtroom and into the veterinary exam room. And our focus for this is the Yorkshire Terrier.
The Yorkie. They are universally described in breed standards as brave, energetic, fiercely loyal, and an excellent watchdog.
And they're tiny.
They are incredibly popular globally, largely because their tiny stature makes them exceptionally portable.
Right, the quintessential purse dog. They are undeniably cute.
They are. But that precise physical architecture, the traits that make them so small and aesthetically pleasing to humans, comes with an exhaustive list of severe medical vulnerabilities.
I have to say, reading through the veterinary source material for this breed was honestly tough.
It can be very grim.
Let's start with something as basic as their teeth. The manuals note that 80% of all dogs get dental disease by age 2, which is high to begin with.
Yes, extremely common.
But Yorkies are exceptionally prone to it. The veterinary guidance specifically dictates that a Yorkie needs its teeth brushed at least 3 times a week. Why is their mouth so much worse off than a standard dog?
It comes down to basic physics and selective breeding. When you breed a dog to be that small, you're essentially cramming 42 adult teeth into a jawbone the size of a matchbox.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it causes severe overcrowding. The teeth sit at odd angles, creating pockets where tartar builds up rapidly. If owners don't maintain that strict brushing regimen, the tartar leads to painful infection and tooth loss.
And it doesn't stop at the mouth, right?
Yeah. Eventually, that bacteria enters the bloodstream and systematically damages the heart valves, liver, and kidneys. Neglecting their teeth can shorten a Yorkie's lifespan by up to 3 years.
Wow, just from not brushing. And that is just the mouth. Moving slightly up, because of their classic dome-shaped head, Yorkies are highly prone to hydrocephalus, which is literally water on the brain.
Yes. Breeders over decades selected for a specific aesthetic, a tiny, round, apple-shaped skull.
Right.
But by shrinking the skull to achieve that look, the bones at the top of the head often fail to fuse properly. It leaves virtually no room for the brain's cerebrospinal fluid to drain normally.
So what happens?
The fluid builds up, putting immense physical pressure on the brain tissue itself. This pressure causes a range of neurological failures, from dull mental function to a spastic gait and frequently severe seizures.
That is just awful, and the structural flaws continue into their internal organs. The sources detail a condition called a portosystemic shunt.
Yes. A liver shunt is a severe congenital anomaly. Essentially, the dog's circulatory system bypasses the liver.
Wait, bypasses it entirely.
Yes. The liver's primary job is to filter toxins out of the bloodstream, but because the blood vessels literally detour around the organ, those toxins continue circulating through the dog's body and brain.
How do you even fix that?
Managing it requires either highly specialized, expensive surgery or a strict lifelong regimen of prescription diets and daily medication to keep the dog from essentially poisoning itself.
Wow. They also suffer from patellar luxation, which is where the groove in their knee joint isn't deep enough, so their kneecaps literally pop out of place, causing them to hop or skip on 3 legs in pain.
Very common in toy breeds, yeah.
But the anatomical issue that really got to me, the one that made me physically wince, involved the neck and throat. Yorkies suffer from instability in their first 2 neck vertebrae, the atlantal and axial vertebrae.
Right, those vertebrae don't align securely, which means the breed is at a uniquely high risk for sudden, catastrophic spinal cord injuries just from doing normal dog activities.
Like what?
Well, the veterinary guide specifically stresses that Yorkie owners must implement ramps or specialized steps from the time the dog is a tiny puppy. If a Yorkie regularly jumps off a standard living room sofa, the repetitive impact can easily fracture their neck.
From a sofa. And then there is tracheal collapse. The veterinary source material provided an analogy for this, and it is brilliant but absolutely terrifying to visualize.
The vacuum hose analogy.
Yes. Imagine your windpipe is like the ridged hose of a household vacuum cleaner. It relies on stiff cartilage rings to stay rigid and open when air is pulled through it.
Right.
But in a Yorkie, those cartilage rings are genetically weak. They lack structural integrity. So when the dog gets excited or pulls slightly on a leash and breathes in hard, the hose just flattens out. It completely collapses, sealing off their airway.
Yeah, the mechanical failure of those cartilage rings leads to a chronic, distinct honking cough as the dog struggles to force air through a flattened tube. It is a fundamental structural failure of their respiratory system, engineered by the pursuit of a specific body size.
Okay, so I have to throw a tough philosophical question at you based on this data.
Sure, go ahead.
If we know definitively that a specific breed is genetically predisposed to their kneecaps popping out of their joints, fluid crushing their brain tissue, and their windpipe flattening like a cheap plastic hose, at what point does our human preference for a cute, portable companion conflict with our ethical duty to prevent animal suffering?
Well, you are identifying the central dilemma of modern purebred dog ownership right there. We have deliberately engineered these biological vulnerabilities into the animal in pursuit of a specific visual standard.
Right.
If an individual chooses to participate in that system by purchasing one of these dogs, their overarching mindset must be one of extreme responsibility.
Because the quote-unquote cuteness is a genetic reality that demands constant hypervigilance.
Precisely. The visual appeal demands an intense, lifelong medical and financial commitment from the owner.
What does that look like day to day?
It means managing their weight meticulously, because carrying even 1 extra pound of fat triggers or drastically worsens almost all of these genetic issues, from the slipping kneecaps to the collapsing trachea.
Wow, just 1 pound.
Yes. It means demanding a comprehensive pre-anesthetic blood panel to check for that hidden liver shunt before you ever allow a veterinarian to put them under for a routine spay or neuter surgery. You aren't just acquiring a furry companion, you are taking on the management of a highly complex, incredibly fragile medical ecosystem.
It radically reframes what it actually means to be a good owner. It's clearly not just a matter of love and providing shelter. It is active, daily medical advocacy.
Looking at the entire scope of what we've analyzed today, it really highlights the immense, multifaceted weight of the human-animal bond.
It truly does. We have covered incredible ground today. We started by looking at how merely keeping a pet requires navigating massive systemic hurdles.
Like the housing market.
Exactly. Like the fact that the modern housing market forces people to surrender perfectly loved 12-pound dogs just because they can't afford a sudden eviction, or they can't afford the arbitrary mandatory pet fees imposed by landlords.
Right. And then we explored the robust legal framework required to protect these vulnerable creatures from malice.
Seeing how California law aggressively steps in to criminalize physical cruelty.
Yes, and how the state recognizes through cross-reporting mandates that violence against a mute animal is frequently the canary in the coal mine for violence against humans.
And finally, we looked at the intense biological realities of the animals we have custom bred to our liking. Confronting the uncomfortable fact that a cute dome head or a tiny stature often masks a terrifying landscape of genetic fragility that requires lifelong medical intervention.
It is a vast, complex web. I mean, housing economics, state lawmakers, and cellular genetics are all deeply intertwined with that quiet animal sleeping peacefully at your feet.
Which leaves us with the final thought for you to mull over. Something that bridges the gap between the macroeconomics and the micro laws we discussed today.
What's that?
Well, we know from the University of Florida study that the vast majority of pets surrendered due to housing issues leave the shelter alive. But their original owners lost them forever. That separation happened purely because of economics.
Yeah.
At the exact same time, we saw how California law aggressively empowers you to protect animals from physical cruelty, granting you the legal right to literally shatter a stranger's car window to save a dog from heat stroke.
Right. Society legally protects the physical rescue, but an economic rescue is left entirely up to the cold whims of the real estate market.
Exactly. So I want to ask you, the listener, as our scientific and cultural understanding of the human-animal bond continues to deepen, will society ever evolve to view forced economic separation as its own form of cruelty?
That's a great question.
We eagerly protect the dog from the hot car, but we allow the housing market to tear that same dog away from a loving family. Should keeping a well-loved pet be considered a protected right, something fundamental to human psychological well-being, rather than just a luxury amenity that your landlord allows you to have for an extra $50 a month?
It really forces us to ask what we value more as a culture. The absolute property rights of the housing system, or the established emotional bond of a family.
Something to think about the next time you look down at your pet and realize that simple loop of love and kibble is actually tied to everything else in the world.